listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher.
A couple of years ago, we took a family trip to Costa Rica. It's one of the best trips we've ever been on. There's something in the air down there. Our kids didn't fight. There were sloths hanging from the trees outside our windows, red macaws flying around, howler monkeys screaming from the trees. It was literal magic. Today we're talking to Andrew Taylor. He runs a wilderness therapy program in Costa Rica for young adults. I tried to get him to talk me out of wanting to actually live in Costa Rica, and it didn't work. We did, however, talk about how wilderness therapy works and what leads teens and young adults to a place where they would benefit from it, and what we can do as parents to teach our kids how to take healthy risks when they're young so they'll be ready to take and handle the bigger risks that come with adulthood. Enjoy this episode and resist the temptation to sell all of your things and move to the Costa Rican wilderness. Today we're talking to Andrew Taylor. Andrew is the founder and executive director of Pure Life Aspiro, a wilderness adventure therapy program in Costa Rica for young adults struggling with depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. He and his wife are new parents to two beautiful twin babies named Annabelle and Coleman, and he's an avid yet mediocre surfer, which I will challenge him on. He's probably better than that, but also the lead guitarist of a cover band that nobody's ever heard of. Welcome to the Today's Mama podcast, Andrew.
Thanks, Rach. That's by far the best intro I've ever had, for sure.
I mean, I sung you in right there. All right, first things first, most important thing we're going to talk about today, your lead guitarist gig. What is top on your playlist? Like, what songs are you ready to slay, like anytime, anywhere?
Oh my gosh. Okay. We always start our show with For Those About to Rock by AC/DC. I love.
Nice. That really brings the energy.
Yeah. We also do Sabotage by the Beastie Boys. And every time we play that song, we get really pumped. And Rock and Roll All Night by Kiss is a huge crowd favorite. And we love playing that one too. So those are my top three probably songs we do.
All I want to yell at you now, in like scream voice, I want to yell, "Can't stand it. I know you planned it." I can't even handle it.
I know, right? Something about that song, right?
I'll turn that on in carpool and just get nuts. That's how cool I am.
You're the cool mom. Good. I like it. I like it.
All right. Well, if I were to ever participate in your cover band, I bring one really solid song to the table, but nobody really gets pumped up. This is the one where you're trying to like cool the audience off, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got a solid rendition of Metallica, Nothing Else Matters in my back pocket.
If you want to kill the party, play that song. That's when everybody...
Seriously, most depressing song you could ever play, but one of the easiest songs you can learn to play on the guitar.
Oh, I know. Everybody grabs a guitar and says, I know a song. And they start playing that song. And listen, I love Metallica. Like, it's a great song. It's just, it's kind of like in Wayne's World, when the guy picks up the guitar and starts playing Stairway to Heaven, and the guy's like, hey, dude, no stairway. That's kind of, that song fits that category. I hate to kill your song.
That's taken over that place.
Yeah, if you ever want to do it, though, I would be proud to let you rock it. I wouldn't hold you back.
I mean, here's my number two, which is also probably everyone else in the world's number two, is Blackbird by the Beatles.
Beautiful song. Yeah, and that's a great song. Definitely not one.
That's still not going to pump your audience up, though.
No.
I will be the backup vocals for Sabotage.
Hired.
Yep, I can yell it really good. All right, so I have to talk about this. In one of our previous episodes that we just did, it was two or three ago, with Jody Hildebrandt. She mentioned her favorite quote was, "Live free or die hard, Bruce Willis." And I totally laughed because, and I mentioned in this episode, because forever this movie is like seared in my mind because it is the first R-rated movie I saw. It's the first movie I saw with boys. And it was at your house in 6th grade.
That makes me so happy to know that I was a part of your first Die Hard experience, because everybody knows where they were when they first saw Die Hard, right?
Yeah, and I was just like, big girl, big moves, dude. I just heard some big words, some high energy. Bruce Willis brought the heat.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we had that movie. I'm sure my parents would not have approved, but that's why we watched it in the basement. They never went to the basement.
I don't recall your parents being there. I feel like maybe your older brother was, and maybe that's why that happened.
That probably makes more sense for sure.
Totally. Okay, so you are living the American dream, which these days might look a little bit like bailing for a tropical destination, taking up residence somewhere like Costa Rica. So, talk to me about life in Costa Rica. What do you love about it?
Oh, it's beautiful. It's stunning. Visually, as you drive around Costa Rica, the greens and the oranges and the animals and the colors of the flowers and the reds and like as you get off that plane, it just is visually stunning. I mean, it really can stop you in your tracks. I love the lifestyle. I love that it slows down a little bit. It's a great country that isn't functioning on all cylinders like we are in the US. We're really driven and everything's like done fast. We're very efficient. And I love that efficiency. But when I get down to Costa Rica and things start slowing down, initially it's always a little annoying, but it's good for me. And I like that about Costa Rica. Like your typical New Yorker, if they don't adapt quickly, will really struggle in Costa Rica. Like, you'll sit down at a restaurant and ask for a glass of water and you may get it in 20 minutes. You may not get it. You might get it in 5, but it's not, everybody's not in a big rush. It slows me down. It helps me keep my priorities straight on who I am, who I want to be, and where I'm going. And I like that their culture does that. And the people are just fantastic, like the nicest people in the world, thoughtful, kind. I'm always learning from Costa Rican people. And then, you got it all: oceans, mountains, rivers. It's just this perfect storm of adventure activity for people that are into that kind of thing.
Okay, Andrew, I need to make me hate Costa Rica now because all I want to do is go back there. We went on a family vacation once to Costa Rica, and it lives as the best trip we've ever been on. There was something in the air that like hypnotized my children. They did not fight. They were the easiest travelers. It surprised me with the infrastructure of the roads and the places we went. I am in love with that place. So honestly, besides like maybe getting your water or not, why should I not leave to Costa Rica right now?
It's harder to live down there than most people think. Cars are expensive. They break down. Their infrastructure. Oh, for you especially, internet. Forget it. You're not going to get good internet living down there. You're not going to
forget it.
Well,
no,
it's very
for real?
difficult, and you've got to make a lot of efforts. Internet goes down. I mean, we've been living the last few years deep in the jungle, 10 minutes up this dirt road, sitting on this mountain. Absolutely beautiful, but at 8:00 at night, when you've got to get something done for work and the power shuts out, you're packing up your car and driving out to find internet anywhere you can find it. That might take you an hour or two, and that for me and what I do, that's like worst case scenario. And that doesn't happen often, but stuff like that happens all the time. The efficiency isn't there. And it's what's good for you. But, a lot of Americans will move down there and be like, oh, I'm going to live the dream. I'm going to live this tropical paradise. And in 6 to 12 months, they're done. And, it's not that they don't love Costa Rica. It's that it's just not as easy to live down there. And managing the red tape of the country, immigration, and running a business down there is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And despite all that, it's kind of what we call the expat tax, and it's you get amazing surf, you get beautiful sunsets on the beach, you get toucans flying through your house, like literally.
Through your house, Andrew. You have had toucans.
Through our house. We've had 2 toucans fly through our house because we had 2 sides of our house that open up, and they would hit the window on the other side, and I've had to like pick them up and like make sure they were okay and get them out.
Like just give their little beak a kiss and send them back away.
I know, it's super sad when they hit the window because it kind of disorients them for a minute, and we're like, "Oh man, you missed the exit there, buddy." And like, check one night, my wife and I are cooking dinner, and this was at another house, but every house opens wide open, so you're kind of living outside down there, even if you got a roof over your head. and a bird flew in, which happens, it's not uncommon to be like, we got a bird in the house. And usually they like work their way out. I go find this bird. It's an owl. There's an owl in our house.
Dude.
And we spent the next half hour trying to get it out, for its own safety and also it was an owl.
And I mean, kind of yours too, because I think owls are like probably a little grouchy, is my opinion. They just seem like maybe they didn't get enough sleep.
I mean, yeah, I've seen like one other owl in my life, maybe a couple at the zoo. Like we got, hey, honey, put dinner on hold. We got an owl in the house, like that's what I love about it is every week there's a new adventure and just something to talk about that's just really cool. I don't want to sound cheesy, and I know it's cliche, but I'm a Jack Johnson fan.
Same.
And there's this song that he wrote on the Curious George album, which is Talk of the Town.
The best album of all times.
Okay.
Sorry, I just had to scream that out. I love that album so much. All right, continue
on. So the main, the line of that song is, I want to be where the talk of the town is about last night, where the sun went down. And I love that line, and it very much encapsulates our Costa Rica experience, where we run into friends and it's not like everybody's not going like, oh, I'm so busy, or, people don't start pounding out their problems. People start going, did you see the sunset last night? Oh my gosh, that was ridiculous. And did you see the moon yesterday? And like, it's for people that are really connected with, the outdoors a little bit more and kind of slowing down and enjoying and appreciating that kind of thing, which I know we all want, but it's hard to do in the States, and I'm back and forth a lot. It's easy for me to get into my old patterns in the States quickly as well. So.
Well, I'm going to say one word that is the only thing that ever deters me about Costa Rica. It's scorpions.
I thought you were going to say snakes. But scorpions?
No, it's scorpions. Because we stayed at this most amazing resort. I'm going to put some links in the show notes. It's called Lapa Rios, and it is on the Pacific side. I'm going to mispronounce. So we flew through Puerto Jimenez. Does that sound like a thing?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So
yep.
That general area. And it was the most amazing. We had macaws flying around. There was a sloth hanging off our deck. It just was so cool. But you'd go to sleep at night and we put the mosquito nets over, and I would wake up in the morning and we all had just a few little scorpions hanging out on those nets. And I feel like they could cause instant and sudden death. How do you deal with the scorpions?
So it's funny you say that. And I'm glad you brought it up, because scorpions are in Costa Rica. They're not lethal or even that venomous. They're the equivalent of a bee sting.
Stop it.
Yeah, that's it. They look terrible, I know, but scorpions in Costa Rica are pretty harmless. And I don't know why you had so many there. I mean, in 15 years of going back and forth and probably 7-8 years of living there full time, I've seen a handful.
Really?
So, yeah. I mean, I haven't seen
Andrew, scorpions, that was supposed to make me feel better about living in my cold mountain tundra. And now you tell me they're just not even
It's not a problem. That should not deter you.
All right. Well, okay. I usually ask people to tell me what their ratatouille is from their childhood, but this time I'm going to make you answer what your ratatouille is from Costa Rica. So you're back and forth all the time, but what is the smell or the taste or the sight, anything that is so home in Costa Rica for you that just brings you back quickly?
That's a great question. That question overwhelms me because there have been so many different phases of my life in Costa Rica. But I think the sight and sound and smell of waterfalls and rivers, especially because I went down to be a river guide. And so my initial moment of falling in love with Costa Rica was falling in love with the rivers down there. And you're going down these beautiful rivers that are fresh and clean. The water's not cold, and you're deep in the rainforest. I mean, places you would be almost impossible to hike to. You can't drive in, and you come around these river bends, going through these great rapids, and then there's these huge waterfalls that come in and just run in and going and playing in them and kind of unleashing that playfulness, that childlike playfulness that comes from nature and water and all that stuff. That's my Ratatouille. That's was like my initial love connection with that country. And to this day, I can sit and stare at a waterfall for hours and just be at peace and really happy and love every minute of it.
I love that. And I'm like Googling for plane tickets right now. You have absolutely not been helpful to me. All I need to do is head to Costa Rica. So
it'll solve all your problems.
I hope you have a little casita ready for me and my family.
Anytime. Always open invite for sure.
All right, I'm in. Okay, so you have a set of twins under a year old. Talk to me about traveling with babies, because you have been like all over, and I swear you've taken those two babies on a plane, which makes me want, for some reason, just want to yell snakes on a plane, like having two babies on a plane. What is your advice for somebody who's traveling with little babies?
Wow, it is intense. A few days before your flight, you and your wife, you start getting a little anxious, you get a little snappy, and you get those pre-game butterflies in your stomach, and like, you both sit down and be like, oh, I'm just anxious about the flight, and it's like 3 days out. Okay, so we did Salt Lake City to LA and back.
Yes.
And that was our first practice run. And, hour and a half flight. We learned a lot of lessons. We learned some good, but the kids did really well. I will say, like, first things first, breastfeed or bottle on taking off and landing, always, right? That keeps their ears from hurting and from them from getting really upset, and it soothes them and puts them to sleep.
Smart,
hopefully.
Yes.
Mid-flight, do what you can. Crinkle paper is our saving grace. That's our silver bullet, man. If they're freaking out, just a little crinkle paper in there. You know what I mean by crinkle paper, right?
No, is it like what you stuff in gift bags?
Oh my gosh. You got to be kidding me. Okay. All right. It's like 4 by 4, 4 inches by 4 inches. It's really loud, like crinkly, like a potato. Imagine a bag of potato chips, like Lay's potato chips.
So like kind of like foil in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
And like whoever did this is the most genius business plan in the world. They just put a little material around it, and it's really bright. And man, you put that in front of them, they grab it, and it just crinkles. It's the most brilliant thing I've ever seen in my life. When we got it, like I think we got, like at a baby shower or something, and like we're like,
what's this dumb thing?
A small napkin that crinkles, right? Like, come on. Anyway, I don't know how many times we've been like, "Where's the crinkle paper?" Like,
that's awesome.
911, where's the crinkle paper? Anyway. So like, you got your silver bullets on board and everything. So LA went well. So then we did Texas, and all this is for work. I do a lot of networking and, like conferences and presenting in the States, and Texas went well too. And we learned a few lessons. Like we put on the Bjorns as we go through security. That helped a lot. Just little tricks like that we're learning. And then, they're pretty good kids on the plane. Now, and maybe this is a conversation for another day, but how to get them to sleep at night once you're somewhere else strange that they're totally disoriented and confused, that's what kills us when we travel, like the nights. Ooh. They do well on the days, though. They like to drive in cars. They like people. They're pretty extroverted at this point. But, man, it's the nights that kind of whoop us.
Yeah.
But the plane rides have gone well. Our big test, we've been building up, right? We're taking the babies to Costa Rica in March, and that's their first trip back down. They're from Costa Rica. Well, we were in Costa Rica when they were conceived, but they were born in the U.S., and my wife's been here taking care of them as I go back and forth.
So, and that Costa Rica one, I mean, it's not a horrible trip, like for big people, but that's a long day for babies.
It's 2 flights. It's our first layover trip, right? So it's 3.5 hours with the layover and then another 3.5 hours. So that's new for us. Do they get overly tired? Do they really lose it on the next flight? I don't know. This is our life. We're not backing down. We've decided like, hey, this is going to be our lifestyle, and we'll do our best to keep them comfortable and get them used to it and, at a young age.
So much crinkle paper. You can do it.
I'm going to buy you some crinkle paper. I know you don't have babies anymore, but you got to see this stuff. It's magical.
I know, dude. I wonder if it'll keep like my angsty teenagers feeling happy inside. I'm like, guys, why are you freaking out? Crinkle paper.
You're listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher. We'll be back right after this.
Join us Saturday, March 16th here in Salt Lake City at the Leonardo Museum for a Tech Reset workshop. I'll be speaking along with Anna McFarlane from Kids Are the Worst on Instagram and Mindy McKnight from Cute Girl Hairstyles and Brooklyn and Bailey on YouTube. We'll be talking all about how to reset your family's relationship with technology for the better. You can grab a link to register in the show notes or visit techresetproject.com for a registration link. We hope to see you there.
And now back to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher.
Okay, well, you mentioned part of the reason you and your family are on a plane so much is because you're back and forth between Costa Rica and the U.S. You started your adventure or wilderness therapy program in Costa Rica. But I want to talk about the outdoors, our mental health, and of course, our kids' mental health. So you work mostly with young adults, but I want to start a little younger and talk about how we get to the place where you're working with young adults. I mean, I guess really how we go from kids to being in a place where we need to reconnect with the outdoors. So like kids, I just did some short Googling. This was just like page 1 of the Google, right? The stats are all over the board, and I'm going to throw just a few at you, and then I'm going to let you talk a bit. But kids today spend half as much time outside as their parents did. The decline in outdoor play is leading to sensory issues in kids. Inmates spend more time outdoors than kids, and doctors are writing actual prescriptions for kids to play outdoors. What is your take on the state of kids and the outdoors today?
Yeah, it's staggering, right? So there's a few things going on here. One is we've created this culture of safetyism, especially with the younger generation right now, specific to iGen or Gen Z, right? Less so with millennials, but that's definitely when it started. And that is this idea that it's not safe to go play outside. It's not safe to run through the neighborhood and have mom and dad not know where you are. You know, and play dates have become the thing, and there's so much structure, you know, that kind of reckless abandon that we had growing up in our neighborhood. I mean, I knew one thing when I ran out the doors was as long as I could hear my mom's voice, that was the limit of my play. And she didn't know where I was. She'd stand out on the back porch and say, Andrew, dinner. You know, and sometimes we'd be a quarter mile away, man. We'd be up building a fort somewhere in the woods, you know, on the vacant lot. And so for some reason, we've gotten very anxious about watching our kids at every second. And it's really misguided. And I think for Gen Xers who are raising a lot of the kids right now, and that, you know, kind of we fall in that late Gen X, early millennial generation. But for Gen Xers, we grew up with milk cartons of missing children, you know, on eating breakfast and, you know, believing that this was really going to happen. And then also the internet hit and all the media is telling us of everybody's missing. And, you know, I get a text on my phone in Costa Rica. There's a system down there when someone gets kidnapped, like it texts the whole country. And I'm terrified. Like, you know, that historically we haven't been as aware of tragedy or problems happening outside of our immediate community. And so it's created this really high perceived notion of danger, stranger danger. And the reality is the numbers are quite low. Like child abduction is at an all-time low. And most of the kids being abducted are being abducted by a family member. And it's not what we think it is. And so this idea of letting your kid run and play outside unsupervised, there's negligence. Like people are getting turned in. And this gets us into like the free range parenting movement, which I could talk about as well. But that's kind of my like quick short answer. The other one is technology, right? You and I both know, and we've talked a lot about this, that, you know, the technology is so enticing. Why do I need to go outside, or why would I? And parents are having a really hard time managing and monitoring that. I say parents in general, like the game has changed, not throwing stones here. I'm saying it's a new ball game. where when we were little, yeah, we played our Nintendo, but it got boring.
Yep.
And then we'd go outside, right? That was it. There was just a little bit of a balance there where now, Fortnite, I logged into Fortnite with my nephew the other day. That stuff is amazing. Like, it's very enticing, and it's hard to compete with that. And it's easy to dial in 12, 24 hours of a video game and not go out and find mischief outside and run amok, right?
And it is just going to get more amazing, right? Like a commercial came on last night it was like a Western game that the graphics were so crazy and the almost like virtual reality connections and all of that stuff to pull them in more and more and more, right? I mean, my husband and I looked at each other and we're like, dude, that looks incredible.
Yeah.
But I hate video games. It's the last thing I'm going to go purchase. But I mean, admittedly, it is compelling.
Yeah. And here's the thing. And I think that I speak a lot on the younger generations when I do presentations and workshops and things like that. And I think we've got to be savvy parents. We have to be savvy adults. Like, we can't just run around being like, that's how it was when I was a kid. And I just did it, right? I know I just did it. But the world has changed. This is a new culture. Like, the younger generation is a different culture. We speak a different language. We have, a totally different experience. And so to keep comparing our experience to theirs, it makes us feel good and it makes us feel important, but it's kind of not the idea. We've got to acknowledge the problems within their culture, and their culture is such that this stuff is really enticing. The other part of this is we're kind of hypocrites. We bag on our kids all day for being online, and we are too. Candy Crush does way more volume than Fortnite.
Yeah.
And we all know who's playing Candy Crush.
Oh, dude. I had a brief stint when Candy Crush first came out. And I mean, it is built with all the bells and whistles, right? Exactly. All the triggers that need to be pulled in your brain to just loop you in, right? On purpose. You can't put it down. And I would just be like, oh, what am I doing right now? I'm crushing it. Just crushing it. Like, I had to take it off my phone because I loved to what I call to crush it. Like, I'd be in bed just like getting my jewels or whatever. And so, but the difference is I, as an adult, could take enough perspective to be like, and enough self-reflection with a mature brain to say, hey, I'm spending like too much time here. That's not what I want to be doing. I recognize that I've built a habit that shouldn't be there. So I'm going to take some steps to fix it. What our kids lack is that ability. We're giving them things and treating them as if they have the emotional intelligence, maturity, or self-control to be able to be like, you know what? I've played a little too much Fortnite. I think I've passed my limit. I'm going to self-moderate and go make myself some celery sticks. Like, they're not going to do it.
Vegetables, and then I think I'm going to do my homework. And
yeah, I wonder if mom's made any fresh hummus. It's not what's happening in their brain. They're like, and then I'm hungry. I'm going to grab some Doritos and I'm going to go back and play Fortnite.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, there's this smorgasbord of stuff that's available to them, and we have to help them emotionally and mentally moderate and make better choices. And I think too many parents are just like checked out from that process because it's either they don't understand it or it's too overwhelming, or maybe they haven't come to see what a problem it is quite yet. Mm-hmm. I think there's a number of reasons, but yeah, it's a whole different language and a whole different game we're playing.
Yeah, the game has changed. It's complicated. That's a lot of what I'm talking about is like we're in a whole new league that is not like very easy to solve. For example, my sister tries to monitor her boys, computer time and screen time. And then she's like, all right, cool. Go run and play with your friends. They'll come back 6 hours later. She's like, what did you do? Oh, we went to Johnny's and played Fortnite at his house, right? It's a community issue. The solutions are not so simple.
Yes. And when you say it's a community issue, that resonates in a big way, because how many parents have wished that they could just talk all their friends' parents into having the same rules? Like, could we all just wait until at least 8th grade to give our kids phones? Or could we all just get on the same page about like how we actually want our kids spending time when they're together playing with each other and encourage that, And I'm going to go a step further to say, I don't think it's a bad idea to just like take a look around and take a look at your friends' parents and say, hey, let's chat. Like, where are we all at? Like, how can we support each other and our kids in the way we want to? And maybe get people on the same page a little bit more. Some people feel like that might be too pushy or whatever, but I actually think more parents would rather talk about, hey, here's how we're doing things. What are you doing? Because I don't want to be the parent where a kid shows up at my house and I expose them to a thing. I mean, expose them like it's going to be anything horrible. But for instance, if there's a kid who, PG-13 movies versus PG movies, or a game their parents don't want them to play versus another, right? Like, I'd rather know and be an appropriate host.
You don't want to show Die Hard to some kid. Maybe their parents are not going to be cool with it, right?
Yeah, but just so you know, my parents were totally cool with it. I went home with some quotes. Everything was great.
Yeah. Yippee-ki-yay, mama. I'm sure that would go over well. Well, okay, so I was in LA and this lady raises her hand and she's like, hey, we did this. We got together with the parents of our kids' friends and we created a contract and we did it with the kids.
Yes.
And, the contract, she didn't go into a lot of detail, but, we set limits around when they go to each other's houses to play, what they're going to do. And I think it sounds forced and we all know that parents aren't always going to be on the same page. But if you get a lot of like-minded families that you want to raise your kids around, it's worth a shot. It's definitely a great place to start.
Yeah. So I've got a girl who's in 4th grade and I constantly have conversations with her friends' parents about what they're going to do about cell phones and how they're handling screen time. Because right now we're in the lucky situation where all these 4th grade kids, none of them have phones. And this is not the common thing. There's a lot of kids who end up getting phones by 3rd grade and they're having big text threads with their friends in 4th grade, but we're in this lucky situation where that hasn't happened. And so I'm constantly kind of making it known how much I like that and how much I'd love if that lasted until they were in 7th or 8th grade at least, right? And I can hear that other parents are like, oh yeah, I recognize the value. We're on the same page, and you can kind of find that and see that. So I think even just in passing conversation, you can start to lay the groundwork for, oh, hey, here's what I'm loving. Here's how I'd love for things to work and see if that helps.
Yeah, even if you reached out to one family and said, hey, when Johnny comes over, what if we sat down and decided kind of what we want our kids to do when they come over, right? And I haven't met a parent yet that's like, I'd really like my kid to have more screen time.
Yeah, I'd really just love them to Candy Crush it.
Yeah, right. I just haven't met that yet. And so I think that most parents are going to be open to the idea of how about some free play outside? Why don't we get them into the backyard? And we know if they're going over to your house, they're not going to play video games, or that you and I are communicating on how much they've played. We strike a balance there.
And I think it almost makes us feel like helicopter parents that we have to do that, but it's the reality we live in that we have to be like, hey, let's push them towards these things, that getting our kids to stay off devices has to be a conscious, concerted effort, that we have to stay involved in.
Well, I just wanted to say before we move on too far, and I think the other side of that is parents, I think we're not addressing parent anxiety, and it's bad. It's bad. It's gone up, right? We are not okay with our kids. I mean, as a society, we've got, again, getting back to this safetyism concept, we've got stories of kids trying to build a treehouse and the cops pulling over and taking their tools away and saying, this is too dangerous, and getting after the parents, right? And so you've got two camps of parents. You've got some parents that are way too anxious to let their kids climb a tree. And then you've got parents that are totally cool with it. But also we have this call out culture going on in society right now where everybody gets called out for being irresponsible and negligent and whatever. And so even the parents that want to let their kid climb a tree or play at the playground alone, they're scared because they're going to get called out. And there are families that have almost risked losing their kids for that. And I touched on it a minute ago, the free range movement. There's this free range parenting movement where kids get, you can print out this little card and give it to your kid. And if an adult stops them walking home from school or at the park and is like, where's your parents? They give them the card. And it's like, hey, I'm a free range kid. My parents have made this decision. They've taught me well. I'm playing outside. You probably did growing up. Like, there's no need to call the cops. I'm a free range kid. And, the fact that we need that, right? I think it's, that's a solution. But this anxiety around our kids can't be dangerous. And I'm a big fan of invite your kids to be a little dangerous. I hesitate to say that, and I had one girl raise her hand and she's like, what do you mean by dangerous? And I'm like, oh boy, I could get myself into big trouble, but reasonable danger, right? Like I compare it to, at one point growing up, I had a broken femur. My brother had a broken arm and my other brother had a broken nose and a black eye. And
oh my gosh,
we have this great picture.
What did you guys do to make this happen?
One was playing football. I was jumping on a tramp. My brother was climbing a tree. Like we were just living. And guess what? We didn't die. And we grew up to be well-adjusted adults.
Yes.
And I think we're missing a little bit of that. I think we're missing a little bit of just, kids are amazingly resilient and tough and strong. Yes, we need to nurture and teach and do all those things and keep them safe. That's our job. But somewhere we've gotten really kind of our perspective or perception has gotten a little bit off. And that's kind of my rally cry to the world is like, let's let them be a little dangerous, because when they're 5 and 6 and 10 and even 14, the consequences of taking risks are going to be pretty minimal. Maybe it's a broken arm, or something like that.
Yep.
When they're 24 and 26 and 28, when they start taking risks, there's two problems. That's when maybe they start taking risks. Well, the consequences are a lot greater when you're an adult. And what kind of risks are you taking, whether it's drugs or alcohol or, there's a lot of unhealthy risks that people start taking. Or, and I see this a lot in my program, people that are terrified to take any risk and they are paralyzed by just getting out there and interacting with the world in a way that, hey, you might get hurt, whether it be physically or emotionally. That's actually the harder problem to deal with and the one that we see more often.
Well, so actually this leads me, I'm going to skip a couple questions and go to a different place, because I think what you're saying in essence is why wilderness or adventure therapy works, because you're able to walk people through taking risks. But still, maybe in some ways it's a controlled environment because you're able to provide the safety or like the construct and the environment where they can do those things with an element of safety, but really stretch themselves into risk. I mean, would you say that's a piece of why adventure therapy helps?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're inviting them to take chances and to take risks. And we manage a lot of that risk, which we should. It's, that's true of anybody you're going to take into the outdoors. That's your responsibility as a professional. But we also know through a lot of research that they are safer in our program than they are out of it. And we're inviting them to be dangerous. We're inviting them to take risks, right? Whether it's surfing or rafting or whatever it may be that we're doing, that is at the core of what we're doing with wilderness and adventure therapy is discomfort and the fact that they could fail and, dealing with nature and its elements. And that's the beauty of it, is you can't negotiate with nature. You can't argue with it. You can't manipulate it. In our human interactions, we can do all of those things. But if you, for example, I always use this example, if we get a student that's, kind of maybe a little defiant and we're like, hey, this is how you ought to pack your backpack, in case it rains. Don't tell me how to pack my pack. I'm going to do it just fine. A good guide will step back and be like, all right, cool. And you'll hike through the day. And in Costa Rica, it rains every day. And when it rains, it's like turning 4 shower heads on you. Nothing will be dry unless it's packed in a dry pack just right.
Yes.
And then they get to camp and they pull out their sleeping bags. And Johnny's got a wet sleeping bag. And he goes to the guide and he's like, hey, my sleeping bag's wet. And okay, I see that. Remember when I was telling you how to pack your pack this morning and you didn't want my help? Yeah. I was trying to help you, man. And okay, well, can you get me a dry sleeping bag? And this might be a little bit dramatized. Well, we're 20 miles this way or 20 miles that way hike to a dry sleeping bag. So, and honestly, we would never put a person in danger of risking their health, but it might be just uncomfortable. Like, hey, you're probably just going to sleep in kind of a damp sleeping bag tonight, man. And that is a natural consequence.
Yes.
Right. And that's the beauty and magic of nature and wilderness therapy and nature in general. And that is that, no one's imposing a punishment. We're not like, hey, you have to sleep at night in a wet sleeping bag because you didn't do what we said. No, a good guide will be like, man, I'm really sorry. I'm happy to help you tomorrow if you'd take my help, but you're probably going to be uncomfortable tonight. There is no other sleeping bag. And that's the beauty, is it teaches us these lessons in this really organic and natural way that people that maybe tend to push back or maybe tend to, use manipulative skills or just be in denial of life in general, they have to accept the realities of nature in order to get more comfortable and in order to gain confidence and know how to navigate it. And so there's just this really magical element that does a lot of the work for us. And that's part of what I love, is it's just a very natural process.
You're listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher. We'll be back right after this.
If you're enjoying this topic today, might I recommend a few others from the archive? Check out episode 6 with Kathy Hirsch-Pasek on raising brilliant kids with research to back it up. I think you'll also love episode 15 with Debbie Reber on raising differently wired kids and the word instead. You might also dig episode 26 with Coach Morgan Scally. We talk about sports, parenting, and raising kids who can move through obstacles on their own. You can find links to those and more at todaysmama.com/podcast.
And now back to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher.
Well, and how many times do we not want our kids to be uncomfortable? So in so many situations, that kid who packed his pack wrong and didn't listen, right? Maybe if he were somewhere else, someone would have been like, oh my gosh, let me get you a dry pack. Some adults maybe like, his parents may be like, take mine. I need you to be warm and safe and cozy. I don't want you to be uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because a similar thing happened to my son at scout camp. He was probably in 6th or 7th grade, and they do an overnighter away from the main camp, which is like a survival skills type of a thing. And he was told to bring his sleeping bag. But he was confused, and all he brought was his emergency blanket. So my kid, and at first I'm like, oh my gosh, you're in the middle of like the high mountains, and it was probably freezing, and did you stay alive? My first response, but then when I settled into it, I was like, yeah, I hope you were uncomfortable, and feel that, because it taught him about listening and preparedness and paying attention, right? So one of his buddies was like, here, you can have like an edge of my sleeping bag. They called it a bro cuddle. And then he had his emergency little like tin. He had probably crinkle paper to keep him warm. But what did that do? It actually, was he uncomfortable? Absolutely. Was that one of his best memories? Completely. It actually ended up being a positive experience. It was not the best night of sleep he ever had, and good. He learned some things from it.
Yeah. And he had to be a problem solver. He had to talk to one of his peers. They had to negotiate an agreement. They had to
negotiate a bro cuddle.
Like, think about it though. Like think of all the good positive interaction that came out from him having to deal with a natural consequence. And that's what is, I think, a parenting in general mistake. I think parents are well-intentioned. I think there's a lot of great parents out there. I'm not bashing parenting right now, but
because it's not bad parenting to be like, oh my gosh, I want you to be comfortable and safe and cozy and sound, right? Yeah. Like that's kind of the first place we come from.
Totally. And I get it now more than ever with my own kids. Like, of course I don't. And that's why it takes intentionality as a parent to be like, oh, here's a moment. Here's an opportunity. Mm-hmm. I had one of my first ones yesterday with my little boy. And, they're infants right now, right? So I haven't had these moments like everything is kind of like they just need our 100% care and attention, but they're just starting to roll over.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there eating breakfast, and my little boy Coleman has his little ball that he's playing with, and he loses control of it, and it lands about 3 feet away from him. And this is really cool because 2 weeks ago, he just would have been like not done anything, but he like rolled over onto his stomach and looked at the ball. And he hasn't figured out crawling at all, right? He just looked at the ball and everything in me was like, go give him the ball. And I'm like, well, hold on. I want to see what he does, right?
Yeah.
And I know he can't crawl. And I'm like, I don't know how my kid's going to get it, but I just want to see what he does. I want to see if he can problem solve. 6 months old, just barely. And he wasn't angry. He wasn't upset. He just looked at the ball and then he rolled back on his back. And then he rolled back on his stomach and he rolled back on his back. And what he realized is he was getting closer to the ball every time he rolled. 3 or 4 rolls and he had his ball. I could have robbed him of that moment, right? This is part of the dad I want to be. I want to be the dad that gives my son and daughter the chance to prove to themselves, not to me. They don't need to prove anything to me, to prove to themselves that they have the intuitive, God-given ability to problem solve and to make the juice, make it happen. Like that is part of growing up into being a healthy adult, is this belief, not just because someone says I'm special, this belief that like I can do it. I can make stuff happen. And I know that the hardest thing as a parent I'm going to have to do is step back. Getting involved is easy. Like I know how to problem solve. I know how to make solutions. But we forget that there's an intuitive something born into us that if we allow it and give it space, we're actually really resilient, intuitive beings that know how to make it happen when we're given that space to. I was so excited. I was so excited. I called my wife Megan because she had to go do some clinical work, and I was like, he got to the ball. She's like, he doesn't know how to crawl. I'm like, I'll explain later. It's like, it was beautiful. It was like, oh my gosh, these guys are amazing. Anyway.
But that right there is the point. It's looking for those opportunities inside the walls of your own home that help them develop that little bit of grit, and it doesn't have to be some big, when they're little, marching them out and making them sleep with their emergency blanket. It's simple stuff
right
like that, and letting that guide your thoughts and your parenting philosophy so you can find those opportunities as you go along, so that when they do leave the walls of your really safe house, they're able to troubleshoot and problem solve and do some of that by themselves, right?
Absolutely. And I'm going to make a bold statement right now, and I don't want to come across as a know-it-all, but I would actually argue that on some level it can be irresponsible to do everything for them.
I totally agree.
In the way that works well till they're 18, but when you send them off to college, man, the problem is when you do that, of course they're going to feel loved, they're going to feel nurtured, they're going to feel cared for, and a lot of their problems are going to be resolved, and they're not going to deal with a lot of tough stuff. Any parent wants that for their kid by nature, right? But the irresponsible piece of that is you also teach them, and it's an unintended consequence, you're teaching them you're not good enough to deal with this on your own, so I have to be there for you. And that produces this side effect. And the side effect is I can't do anything. I'm incapable. And, depression and anxiety and all of this stuff's going through the roof right now. Going through the roof. That's a little bit dramatic, but it's going up higher than a lot of previous generations. And I'm not saying this is the only cause, but it's part of the problem. And so it's almost selfish to be like, I want to take care of them. And I even recognize that in myself right now. And I'm trying to keep myself in check. Like, we just started sleep training them and letting them cry at night. The most painful thing I've ever done is walked away from my babies screaming in the dark and shutting the door and walking away. Like, the selfish thing to do would have been for me to go pick them up, because it would have made me feel better. And of course they would have gotten to sleep right away, but my children need to learn to cry to sleep.
Yeah.
And so that's why I keep coming back to, I think as parents, we keep throwing the blame on kids. I think we need to do a real hard look in the mirror as parents. What's our anxiety? What is our issue? And where can we be more intentional in raising healthier kids and healthier adults?
Yeah. And where can we drop our kitten mittens, right? Because we're doing so much with kitten mittens.
I love that term. I'm gonna rob it. I'm still in that.
Seriously,
Yeah.
take it. Just like handling our kids with Kitten Mittens. And then if you want to make it even better, I'm going to send you a GIF from an actor, Charlie Day, who talks about Kitten Mittens.
Okay.
I'll put
Good.
that in the show notes.
Well, and it's tough. And the reason I try to be sensitive around this conversation is I haven't raised adolescents yet, right? But my job is dealing with 18 plus year olds to 30 who have depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, substance abuse issues. And so in a way, I'm reverse engineering here. And I get this everywhere I go, every gathering or dinner or party or something, when people are like, they find out what I do. The question is, how do I avoid my kid going to your program? And this is the conversation, right? And so that's why I think it's relevant topic for what we're talking about, because I'm seeing the aftermath. And you know what? It works. Like what we do works and it helps, and it's a huge help. But I know everybody would rather not go to my program. I know that.
Yep. And so if we talk about how to avoid it, right? It's letting your kids take small, or not even small, letting your kids take risks in their childhood, in your home, in their play, encouraging them to make their own decisions. What else would you add to that list?
Allow natural consequences to play out.
Yes.
Allowing for natural consequences is key, and especially when they're young. And I know we could sound like a broken record, but intervening with coaches and teachers, and we are totally debilitating our coaches and teachers in this day and age. A lot of the good people that I know, some of the good people that I know are quitting because they're just like, dude, Andrew, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, they're worn out.
The parents have totally hijacked. They can't do it, right? And the kids don't respect them because the parents don't respect them. What we've done is taken one of the most important and key elements to growing up as a healthy adult, and that is good teachers and mentors, and we're totally debilitating them. My parents, and I believe this should be true even in this day and age, were totally hands off unless there was a real need to get involved. And even then, they barely would meddle. They never meddled with me. And it's funny because I was talking to my dad last year, and we were kind of reviewing all my coaches. And I mean, as I was growing up, I had some tough coaches, man, some mean coaches. I had some great, even those tough, mean coaches were fantastic coaches. Like I've been wanting to write a thank you letter to one specific, or a couple of them, and just say, thank you for being so hard on me. And, my dad kind of quietly kind of showed some reservation and said, I didn't love that coach for you at that time. And I was like, what? I never heard you criticize any of my coaches. In my eyes, you were always 100% behind my coaches. And, he just said, I wish you got more playing time. I don't know, you were dealt with very fairly or whatever that may be. But, we can have that conversation when I'm 40. But what an example of just letting me deal with the difficulties of growing up and not feeling that my parents were totally there for me, loving, supporting in every way, but not feeling that I had a lifeline there to make things easier when I was uncomfortable. I think that our clients, one of our guides said it best. He's like, our clients suffer from never suffering in a way.
Ooh, I love that.
I do too, right? They suffer from never suffering. And that's pretty broad, not every single one. There's a lot of different circumstances. And a lot of them have suffered from depression, anxiety, or bullying or whatever, but suffering in the sense of being uncomfortable and having, to deal with and problem solve in situations where they might get rescued, and allowing those natural consequences to play out. I could talk forever. I know I go off here.
No, I love it. And one quick thing I want to play off the sports piece is when we talk about suffering from never suffering, right? They suffer from never suffering. Mm-hmm. We give them small things to suffer about. So we build expectations even as parents around ourselves about how we're going to show up. So I played softball in high school. Both my parents worked a lot. And Andrew, I'll tell you, I don't think my parents ever came to one of my softball games. And guess what? Mm-hmm. That has never been, I am 100% okay. It never bothered me. It's never been a source of pain or angst, because guess what? Guess who I was playing softball for? Myself. Like, I didn't need to play for whoever was showing up to watch. As a matter of fact, I think I prefer when people are not there. I'd just rather play. But today, if you look at the quotes on Instagram or the things that go around on Facebook, the pressure that we put on each other in the ways that we're supposed to show up. It's that, oh man, if you are not there in solidarity for every one of those moments, where are you? Because they're scanning the audience looking for the most important person. It's you. No, the most important person should be them, that they're there to do it for them, not you. And so can we maybe skip a couple games? Yeah. Can that be okay? Can we let them head out without a fan in the crowd? I'm going to say yes.
Totally. And I think this leads to another point. You're saying you played softball for you. You were Rachel. You had your identity as Rachel. And I think that as parents, we need to have our identity as individuals and show our children our healthy self-identity as we interact very intimately with them. You'll appreciate this. We had one of my childhood mentors came to Costa Rica last year on a surf trip with his buddies and their wives. And we were pregnant. And so we went out to this great lunch and we were grilling them and just give us parenting advice. And, here we had, in my mind, some of the best parents I've ever met. I know their kids, grew up in the same community. And here are these guys that are in their mid 60s and they're surfing. They do a surf trip to Costa Rica every year. And I'm like, all right, cool. So give us the advice. And they all sat there and they said, hey, we have grandchildren at home right now with basketball games and soccer games. And we're missing a lot on this trip. And we miss like on a deep powder day, we'll miss our grandchildren or our children's events to go skiing. And I know these are very involved parents, but they said, the one parent said, it's very important that I wanted my children to know that I too had hobbies and interests outside of them that I found a balance in life with. And their kids really responded well to that. And that it wasn't all about them all the time, every moment. And I loved that. Megan and I still come back to that all the time of like, okay, we need to, strike that balance. We know we're going to be loving and involved parents. We know who we are, but we also need to find that balance between, hey, we're going to go skiing today and good, you carpool's picking you up and, good luck with the game.
Yeah.
And,
peace out. I'm going to go get some pow.
Right. We've been at every game so far. Like, you'll do well. We'll be excited to hear how it goes. There's deep pow. And guess what? Someday you're going to go ski deep pow with us, or you won't. You'll ditch us for your buddies. Right. But
yep.
There's a healthiness in maintaining some identity as well in the process. And I know it's not easy. I'm struggling with that already, in these first 6 months, but, that we're trying to set that intention early on.
Well, so none of us have parented perfectly. We've all screwed our kids up in some way, shape, or form, right? And you end up working with a lot of young adults who have some big work to do. Is there hope? Can we rewire our brains? Like, what is your experience around the success stories of seeing people be able to actually change?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the younger you can catch it, the better. The younger you can instigate change, the better. But absolutely, I think we're resilient human beings. And a lot of the young adults that we work with, they're looking for change. They're invested and bought into that process. And, we're not dealing with young people that are just like, I hate you, I don't want to do this. In fact, in my experience, they're going like, dude, I'm lost, help. That's more what I'm seeing. And I get emails and calls from our alumni all the time that are like, hey, I got a great job. I have a great girlfriend. I have a great boyfriend. I finished college. I'm pursuing this project. And, the outdoors and what we do is just one way to go about it. But, I absolutely think there is. And I'm a huge believer in the millennials and iGen. Like, there's a lot of hope in this generation. They're extremely smart. They know how to navigate these technologies. I love so many things about millennials and their ability to problem solve. Like, look at Uber, look at Airbnb. Those are two industries that have changed the game.
It's reinvented the way we see the world and we do things. And honestly, like ride sharing, Uber and Lyft, it's brilliant. And we do need to reimagine this world we live in. And we've got some really, really big problems to solve. And I'm just playing on what you're saying, because I actually do feel really hopeful about these generations coming up, because guess what? They have got to clean up our air and they've got to clean up our water and they've got to take on some really big issues that are facing us in ways that we just can't seem to come up with.
Totally. They are going to provide the solutions of the future. They are, not us. We grew up without it too much. They are. And they've got amazing tools to do it. And so I'm a total optimist. And when people get all negative and down on the future and all these things, yeah, there's some crazy stuff going on right now. But we're resilient beings, right? Like, we know how to make things happen. And the irony is when we get negative on the world has never been a better place to be alive. If you're a woman, if you are a different race,
Yep.
if you are poor, if you are all of these things, it has never been a better time to be alive. If you have poor health, like, we got to remember that, man, and put it in perspective that, like,
violent crimes at an all-time low, like lower since any time since like the 1930s or something like that.
yeah, it's never been a safer time to be a human being in the history of the world. Opportunities that we have are amazing. And this generation's got it, you know? And I also think, you know how I was saying earlier, how nature's kind of a natural, like you can't negotiate with it. I think adulthood is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like, adulthood is this great neutralizer where eventually a kid's going to run it. You know, if a young adult is struggling on their path and maybe they're dealing with entitlement or unrealistic expectations, or they haven't suffered natural consequences enough, they're going to get there. Adulthood
Life's
won't
going to come
up.
for you. Life is absolutely going to come for you.
Right. Whether it's through kids that teach them that, or a good job, or an exciting career path that maybe they take some blows along the way to get there. Like, I'm a huge believer, and I love these younger generations. And that's part of what I like to get out there and talk about is, like, stop complaining. Like, my beef is with the parents and the adults and the bosses that are like, oh, millennials. It's like, why don't you learn a few things and figure out that they are different? Don't expect them to be like you. They won't respond well to that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I get on my soapbox, man. I could keep going, like I say, all day long.
Everything you're saying, so good. So I'm going to read back your favorite quote to you, and I want you to just expand on it a little bit.
Yeah.
Men are anxious to improve their circumstances, but unwilling to improve themselves. They, therefore, remain bound. And that's from James Allen. Talk to me about that.
Cool. So I came across this at a really important time of my life. And I think it's one of the reasons I'm passionate about young adults is my 20s were a bit of a mess in a lot of ways. And I was lost, and my teens were great. You know, things came easy to me. I had a lot of opportunities and privileges. And I thought, man, I'm going to, like, launch into young adulthood and be like, bam, take off. Right. And I did just the opposite, you know, and I got into some bad relationships that didn't work out. And I started businesses that failed, and I was floundering. And I kind of hit this wall in my late 20s where I'm like, I have nothing to show for years and years of work in life and getting out there. And I felt pretty beat up. And I came across this quote from the book, really short read, As a Man Thinketh. And I think there's a As a Woman Thinketh version that they've done. And
yeah,
this could apply to everybody, right? Is my point. And, you know, I really wanted to change my circumstances. And at that time in my life, I made the decision that I needed to work really hard on myself, that I wasn't investing enough into my own self-development. I went back to graduate school to get an MBA. I started waking up at like 5 a.m. and reading good books and putting a lot of time into my own personal development. And I didn't have a lot to show for it for years, but I committed to that. I'd go running, you know, every morning when it was dark. I would listen to books on tape. I started listening to podcasts, started just really investing a lot in, like, I got to get there, you know, and I'm obviously falling short somewhere, and putting a lot of work into myself. And I can say 10 years later that I'm living the dream in every way. Like, I'm working my dream job. I get to work internationally in a beautiful country that I have always wanted to live and work in. You know, I have the freedom to move back and forth between the states when I need to, like right now with my babies. And that quote for me, just like, if I could say that one thing to anybody, it's like, you want to improve this? Because you see so many people are like, man, I wish, or I only wish, or I want more, you know, out of life. And it's like, okay, great. That's a great place to start. What are you willing to do to work on yourself? that's where you get stuck. And, are you willing to do it or not? And that's the unsexy work, right? That's just the day-to-day grind of improving yourself so that you can bring something to the table, so that you can accomplish the things that you really want to and change your circumstances. And so that's really played out for me in a really positive way. And that's one of the reasons I love this quote and love sharing it with others.
I love it. And I think what you do in the outdoors and with wilderness therapy is it's just that person. It's you, it's yourself against these challenges or hurdles or working with a team or whatever it is. It provides all these opportunities to improve yourself really directly, right? Your really direct results or consequences are right in front of your face, like
Absolutely.
your wet sleeping bag or getting lost or whatever it is. And so it really is just like a big therapeutic playground.
Absolutely. Totally.
Okay. Now, Andrew, you have a podcast. What's it called? Where do people find you?
It's called In the Trenches. I'm on iTunes, In the Trenches with Andrew Taylor. I'm interviewing a lot of professionals that I work with in what I do, and starting to branch out into I'm really interested in the young person experience, whether that be technology management, social media, bullying, depression, anxiety, college, whatever it may be, entrepreneurship. I don't know. It's pretty broad. I'm a curious person, and I get really excited about a lot of different topics. But yeah, please join me. I'd love, anybody of your listeners that would be interested. I'd love to have you check in and see if anything resonates.
Okay. And if people want to find more out about your program, where can they find you?
They can find us at purelifeadventure.com. purelifeadventure.com. Our website has all the information you would ever need. We got a phone number on there. You can call and talk to our admissions person. And, you can find me on Instagram at pureliferu. Facebook, Pure Life Aspiro is our page. I haven't launched it yet, and you helped me decide this yesterday, but I'm just kind of launching a little personal website called andrewtaylor.io. That should be up and live in a couple weeks.
Yes.
And you'll be able to reach me there as well.
Side note about website, because Andrew and I talked about websites the other day. I have bought all my children's names as a URL to save for them for the future. So as you peruse those URLs, pick up your kids' names because they may be still available as a .com. You never know.
That's a cool idea. That's a really good idea. Because
I
tried
$6 a year.
Yeah, I tried to get andrewtaylor.com, and somebody has it. They're not doing anything with it. And so I said, I want to buy it. And whoever owns it was like, you can buy it for like $20,000. I'm like,
I know, dude.
Looks like andrewtaylor.io is going to have to be good enough.
Yep. You're all good. All right. So I will be seeing you in Costa Rica for reals though. And I hope you're getting my casita ready. Family of 5 arriving anytime.
We've got the Hersher suite ready to go. Anytime you're ready.
Done. Keep the scorpions out.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. See ya.
Thanks, Rach.
Hey, if you've got a favorite episode, please share with your friends. Even better, tag us in your Instagram stories or Facebook or wherever you hang out online. We'd love your help spreading the word about the Today's Mama podcast. We're also taking interview recommendations. Send us an email to podcast@todaysmama.com or shoot us a message on Instagram over at Today's Mama. We'd love your ideas.
You've been listening to the Today's Mama podcast with Rachel Hersher. To find out more, go to todaysmama.com. That's today's, MAMA.com. Today's Mama, connecting moms and families with the best of today.